Review of House of the Dragon series, the last part. The Dragon Dance begins. The Season 1 finale of House of the Dragon premiered, ending the 10-week journey on a bittersweet note, as the war begins after the first dragon battle. The world of Westeros has never looked so glorious and alive before, but the first season of House of Dragons, which is sure to be one of the best TV seasons of 2022, took a big turn. Follow me with the House of the Dragon series review. The 9th episode of the series focused entirely on the Greens and their plots to usurp the throne from Rhaenyra, who is the heir named by her father, King Viserys. So now the series focuses entirely on the Blacks as they react to the news of the usurpation and begin to prepare for the coming war. But in absolute monarchy, there is no such thing as a good king or queen. Therefore, the idea that a good queen or king can exist is a myth. But why did I state this point at the beginning of this discussion? Because at the beginning of the last episode of House of the Dragon series, titled The Black Queen, Rhaenyra, Emma Darcy tries to be the ideal mythical queen. He adopts a reasoned and measured approach to the art of politics and tries to prioritize the interests of the kingdom over his own claim to rule. In short, the episode Black Queen is an interesting companion to last week's episode, The Green Council, as both episodes tell the story of a female leader who tries to stop the inevitable march towards war led by the men around her. Slow down in The Green Council, Queen Alicent Olivia Cook finds herself manipulated by men led by her father, Otto Hightower Rhys-Ifans. Now in The Black Queen, Rhaenyra finds herself confronted with something much more primitive, and that is accepting war despite coercion and without politics. Of course, although the men around Rhaenyra push him to fight, but Princess Rhaena Sev best tells her husband Corlys Velaryon Steve Toussaint, every man standing around the painted table wants him to take the realm to war, and Rhaenyra is the only one who has shown restraint. Notably, these men include Rhaenyra's own husband, Prince Daemon Matt Smith. These events were a summary of the final episode of the first season of the House of the Dragon series. Unlike many other series, House of the Dragon knew from its very first episode how to work on both important levels of a series with a historical adaptation approach being both epic and subtle. This episode is full of those little details that only make the relationship between these characters stronger over time. This episode brings a lot of characters together in one place, and again, the show makes the conversations and decisions as exciting and dangerous as anything seen on television to date. When you have to wait to see if your allies are really with you, any word can have deadly consequences. This episode really shows how hard it will be for Rhaenyra to use and defend what is hers in the coming seasons. His enemies are everywhere and he has very few allies. Of course, this current situation is really one of Rhaenyra's own making, as she never followed her father's advice that she should work on building alliances and relationships not only with the people of the court but with the people around Westeros. Now that the time has come, Rhaenyra must essentially start from scratch, making the path many times more difficult than she imagined. The final episode, or Black Queen, also shows new sides to some of the characters who have been in the background since the beginning of the series. It's a nice sight to see Lord Corlys and Rhaenys back together again, and the things they say and do in this episode really establish these two as some of the most important characters in the Westeros universe, which makes a lot of sense since they are the ones who control the seas of Westeros thanks to their larger fleets. Keep an eye out for these two, as they will play an important role in the upcoming events of Season 2. During this episode, Rhaenyra's two eldest sons also appear as characters defined in the past. This is as they should be, as these two will also be part of very important events related to the upcoming war. But one of those important things about Rhaenyra's children actually happens in this episode, and it includes a wonderful sequence. If this sequence is just a sign of what we'll see in future seasons as the war reaches its climax, then I'm personally looking forward to seeing it as soon as possible. In the spectacular and, of course, extremely disturbing sequence of the confrontation between Aemond and Lucerys, There is one point that stands out, and that is nothing but the deadly and uncontrollable nature of dragons. During this terrifying sequence, two boys chase each other through the clouds, but events escalate beyond their control. But why? Because Lucris' dragon Araxes, who is terrified of the bigger dragon, attacks Amund Vigor's dragon. Of course, Araxes does this explicitly against Lucris' orders. Vigor, out of Amun's control, angrily responds to Araxes. This sequence feels like the perfect point of no return for House Targaryen, where it fits easily into the larger themes of House of Dragons. Because ultimately what this sequence makes clear is that dragons are wild beasts. They can never be completely tamed or controlled. In fact, the series repeatedly shows that it is the creatures that choose their riders, not their riders. Therefore, it is foolish to believe that even kings and princes can control these creatures. The visual effects team also does an amazing job here, and their efforts during this sequence are to be commended. Of course, despite all the big and small events of this episode, Rhaenyra is still the main character, and unlike Alicent, we can see that even after all the flaws in her, such a character is still really a queen who has something seemingly positive on the horizon of her future. Wants, his sense of duty, and the way he thinks about what would happen if they bring dragons to battle is really respectable. Leaders working in today's world don't even think about such things. However, like everyone, he has a red line, and this is where we see that red line being broken, which is the health of his children, leaving you in awe of what the future holds for this character. Looking at all 10 episodes of House of Dragons, the creators compared Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship to the patriarchal power structures of Westeros. This series introduced Alicent as a woman who cooperates politically with people in the hope of a bright future for her children by manipulating her father. In contrast, Rhaenyra strongly resisted the manipulation of her personality, even by her own father. But the Black Queen episode shows that a lone Rhaenyra can also push back strongly against these organizational and political prejudices. For example, an example is when she is in premature labor. While she's in labor, Daemon ignores her express orders that nothing be done while she's in bed. This is an important point. A point that says the traditions and structures of this feudal society are more than a thinly painted veneer. In fact, these traditions are the origin and symbol of that borderless violence. With these interpretations, an important question is extracted from the final episode of the Dragon Family series. Can a king or queen really control these systems built on violence and terror? Or if those entities are war-hungry, what chance does someone like Queen Rhaenyra stand against them? The answer to this question is currently unknown. But at this point, and perhaps at any point, there is no choice for any of these characters to avoid the war the dragons are clamoring for. The Black Queen episode suggests that this conflict is inevitable, knowingly and deliberately evoking images from earlier in the season to acknowledge it. The centerpiece of the show's first episode, Dragon's Heirs, was a birth sequence that contrasted with the brutality of the tournament, a statement of the show's purpose that resulted in the deaths of Queen Aemma Brooke and her son. Now the Black Queen follows the same episode and offers a similar approach, as the stress of Alicent's coup drives Rhaenyra into premature labor, resulting in her stillbirth. All this means that the start of war is inevitable because of this political rebellion of power-hungry men and women who are their toys. But there is a bitter irony in the heart of these games' politics. Because it doesn't matter what happens in the future, because no matter what happens, House Targaryen will win, and of course, House Targaryen will lose. Now I return to my initial statement. Certainly, Rhaenyra doesn't want war any more than Alicent wants war. Because Rhaenyra recounts her family's history at the beginning of this episode. When the dragons flew to war, everything burned. That means I don't want to rule over a kingdom of ashes and bones. Rhaenyra's statement is a perfectly logical argument, and of course it represents the position of a good queen. But as I said at the beginning, unfortunately there is no such thing as a good queen. So, this conflict takes all it can from Rhaenyra. First her unborn child, then her second child until she gets the commitment she needs from him. Maybe one day Rhaenyra was a good person with good ideals. However, the Black Queen episode makes it clear that Rhaenyra no longer has the luxury of decency or representation. Instead, she is a queen and must be what the ruling system wants her to be. In the end, it must be said, the last episode of House of the Dragon is really a magnificent example of what can be done in the frame of a television work. For years, the media has been plagued by low-effort, low-energy productions, but now a series can easily match or surpass what a major motion picture does.